Welcome. It's halftime of Thursday Night Football here in Week 16. I cannot believe it. It is already, and it's only Week 16. It feels like we've been doing Groundhog's Day over and over. I believe this might be our final episode here for this week, or not this week, but obviously this week, but this season. As we get to the end here, we've got Christmas next Thursday. Definitely take the time with your family and do that, and then we have New Year's the week after that. So this is going to be it. This is going to be it for the 2025 season.
And ever.
I don't know about forever. We're not going to make it be it forever for sure. We're going to drag it back here next year, but we definitely do appreciate everybody that has come out and hung out with us throughout the year. And part of that was we brought one of our friends back. We brought Joey right back. Joey was with us a couple weeks ago and really just enjoyed the episode that Joey did with us. And we had talked about doing a little bit of Christmas celebration here, but just kind of hanging out here during this halftime of Seattle and the Rams, a big matchup here in the NFC West. But Matt, Joey, what do you guys, how are you guys doing tonight? Take it away.
Joey, you're our guest. Come on.
I'm doing good. I did tempt and like kind of bait Jeff to come on tonight with promising that Santa Claus would come on, but the ensemble did not arrive in time. But I'm still here. So
Santa Claus, is it a jumpsuit? Is it a Santa Claus jumpsuit?
The real Santa was going to come on tonight with us.
Oh, I see. I see.
No, I'm doing good. I'm hanging out with you guys. I had such a good time a couple weeks ago. I would love Colby Parkinson to catch some passes tonight, please. I'm in 14 semifinals this week, and I played him in 5 of them. So please catch the ball.
We have a Terrence Ferguson touchdown. Terrence Ferguson side. It really should be 2 touchdowns here for Terrence Ferguson, because that was kind of a little bit of a shady call of not getting that one. But Davis Allen's gonna catch 27 yards, but nothing for Colby Parkinson. And it was one of those. I think we talked about it, Matt, over a month ago, kind of before the crowd kind of circled around the scent of Colby Parkinson.
You brought it up. I've been crediting you on a lot of shows over the past month about you calling out Parkinson as a guy that it seemed like he was going to be the top head in that 3-headed tight end, situation. And it's come to life. I mean, the past 9 weeks, 9 weeks, he's tight end 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even last week against Detroit, we saw him with Devontae Adams going out of that game. We saw him kind of step out of it had been touchdown dependent prior to that. Last week, it looked like it was more, he could be the number 2 option in this offense. But now, obviously, tonight, I haven't seen it there. It's a revenge game for him. He was a former Seattle Seahawk, and now landing with the Rams. But with Devontae Adams being out tonight, I mean, that's kind of a good jumping off point for Matt. I know before the show, you have a guy with the Rams here that you wanted to talk about. And if you want to talk about that guy, go right ahead.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's Kanade Mumfield. I mean, I think that watching that guy at Pitt, I thought he had the best press release game of any prospect. Of maybe not the best, but one of the best of the prospects in the wide receiver class last year. And it was fun to hear the coaching staff say this week that we feel like Mumfield brings things to the table that are very similar to what Adams brings to the table. And that's a pretty lofty comparison for most people who probably aren't familiar with Mumfield. But if you watched his press release game, you would understand why they said that. Because for most wide receivers, there are a lot of wide receivers who have certain footwork moves down and arm counters down, and they have like a whole vocabulary of different methods to use, but the craft in which they use them is bad. Like, it's just like someone who speaks monotone. That's basically and Mumfield actually understands how to emphasize the difference in pacing to artfully set up the move. And you even saw that I think it was either London. It was in London probably where they were playing. It was either London, where he had the touchdown. He had a nice move, and I think he had a chance at another like that. And so he's also a very good acrobatic receiver who can make tough catches over the middle. And not very fast, but fast enough. He's got kind of quicker than fast type of player. And in the red zone, it doesn't matter. If you can win early in the red zone, that's it. And that's why I think that he's someone that by the end of this game, we might see him have 40 or 50 yards and a touchdown, and he's already halfway there in the yardage department. So we'll see. As Stafford's thrown enough to really bad receivers over the years. He's usually had a couple of great ones, and then a lot of guys that were, I joke, his roommates who woke up late for the game. Chris Durham, folks like that. And then I would say that, with Mumfield, I think he's got someone who he can, he could probably gel with a little bit. And I think that he offers more as a route runner than what we'd see from Whittington or Tutu Atwell. They're not one-dimensional, but they have a lot fewer dimensions to their games than what Mumfield provides, and that's a better complement to what they already have in Puka Nacua, because they get a even if the guy's 60% Devontae Adams, what he does well is good enough to give you some sort of surprise fantasy play. So he was someone I mentioned this week in the replacements as like preemptively pick him up, and just see if Adams has to miss another week, he might get enough confidence in this game. Or if you're super desperate and you want to go for somebody that might give you a touchdown or two in just the oddest of scenarios, kind of like Jalen Naylor last week, who I mentioned in the replacements is like, 3 catches, 2 touchdowns. I mean, it's an odd call. You can't predict that really week to week, but you can see the scenarios for how that might unfold. And with Mumfield, there's a potential scenario where that unfolds.
I really like where you went there and talking about how, and I think it's one of the things that I love about Sean McVay is just the ability to adjust on the fly and really kind of rebuild his system over and over again in different directions. And so I think when they had Cooper Kupp, you talk about Tutu Atwell and talk about Jordan Whittington. When they had Cooper Kupp was pretty limited in the role that Cooper Kupp was going to play. And so as part of that, they had to build complementary receivers around Cooper Kupp to allow Cooper Kupp to do those things. Now, with having Puka Nacua and then replacing Cooper Kupp with Devontae Adams, who can move all over the field and he can win in every single area of the field, that's where you open it up a little bit for a Mumfield type of a player that does shadow Adams. And they've even talked about it during the broadcast about how basically Mumfield is shadowing Adams. He's going everywhere Adams is going, and they're on the sidelines talking to each other. And so I think it definitely is moving the direction away from having the Cooper Kupp where like we need our deep threat here with Tutu Atwell, and we need these other players that can allow Cooper Kupp to do the things that he does well. Now, because we can move Puka Nacua, we can move Devontae Adams around the field. Now we can look for some more mobile, some more flexible pieces in here, and then really kind of open up this 3 tight end sets that we've seen them run heavily. A lot of these 3 tight end sets.
No, it's a great point, and I think that it just tells you that, I mean, there's so many different ways to win, and if you are going to go lead slot receiver with Kupp, then that just means that now you're having guys run off the defense so that Kupp can shine with the two-way goes and the things that he does with his movement. So, it's terrific. And also you just see the flexibility where they can, also with the team that you can focus 3 tight ends or 2 tight ends, and teams might forget a little bit about Mumfield in a way where if he earns a one-on-one, he can burn you in the same way that if they just pair up, they match up one player on Devontae Adams, he can burn you. But Adams can burn you deep, whereas Mumfield, maybe one day that's the case. In college, he could do that for sure. But in the NFL, I mean, the speed isn't that great, and we haven't seen enough from him to see how much his aerial acrobatic game is going to translate against top corners.
Yeah. What do you think, Joey?
Agreed. No, you kind of hit the nail on the head, Jeff, when I wanted to point out that the broadcast, not once, not twice, but 3 times has mentioned, Adams and Mumfield are hanging out together. And I think on the last time I was on, we talked about, I love mentorship. I love when you see a veteran that excelled in the league mentoring a young guy. And I love to see it. And I'm wishing I'd picked up Mumfield instead of Colby Parkinson to to play this week in a flex spot.
But I think yours was probably the smarter choice. This one's the riskier one. Plus the column I do is really about, hey, you can't get Colby Parkinson on the waiver wire. You mean Jawar? Jordan was taken off like as the hot thing, and you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. How about Audric Estime or Evan Hull? Let's talk about those guys. I'm really looking at like desperation plays that might get you some points as opposed to nothing at all. So, and sometimes they hit bigger. But you brought up mentorship, Joey, and one of the things that we saw that was kind of fun today on our Football Guys message board was Joe, I think, showing a post on Twitter of Phillip Rivers working with Anthony Richardson. And Richardson has the orbital bone fracture, and he still has blurry vision. So even though his 21-day window is available, he's probably not going to play this year. They already pretty much said Phillip Rivers is the starter for the rest of the year. But I know Anthony Richardson's quarterback trainer. I've worked with him over the years, and when I asked about, quarterbacks in general, because he works with Caleb, he works with Brock Purdy. I've asked him about quarterback development in the league, and he's, he may get a chance maybe one day to be one of those first coaches who they hire we need a quarterback development coach, not just a quarterback coach who teaches game plan. So he may have a chance with that. But I think that from what I've seen over the years and talking with people, and we know this anyway, just from what media reports, there's very little quarterback development that goes on in the league. So when you see a player like Phillip Rivers getting a chance to work with Richardson, he's a player that I just know that, looking at what Caleb Williams went through last year, where it's like no veteran quarterbacks in the room. Last year or this year in Cleveland, really no veteran quarterbacks in the room for half the year. There's a lot of cases where that type of thing has unfortunately happened. And, so I'm kind of enthused by the possibility of maybe they can keep Phillip Rivers on staff and let him do a little bit more. Maybe he could work with Richardson, or maybe it's, because you look at with Caleb Williams, he gets Case Keenum, and you got to imagine that as much as Case Keenum was at best a mediocre starter for stretches, he's seen so much in the league. He's seen pretty much every offense, every defense, been on so many coaching staffs that experience alone provides a perspective to Richardson to be able to go, trust me when I tell you, I may not be able to do this the way you might one day be able to do it physically, but I'm telling you, I've seen guys like you or close to you in the league who when they figured it out, this is how their games developed. And it even helped me, even though I'm not going to be where you are. So that's a guy I still believe could be a reclamation project in the league. But I'm curious who you guys think could be like a quarterback reclamation project where you're like, if I'm in a dynasty league and it's a deep league, who would you go, it's not over yet for them. I'm more than willing to like add them to the end of a roster in an expanded offseason scenario and just see what we learn about their development. And then if it starts to work out, I can keep them on my roster. If not, that's fine. I'll dump them, but I can get them back pretty much at any time until it's very clear one way or the other that what their career is going to look like.
I might have bought too high on him about 3 weeks ago, and I know Jeff saw me doing this because he's in enough leagues with me. But I was going after Mac Jones, like whether he's in San Francisco next year or if he moves on, he gets a starting job elsewhere. I don't think Mac Jones' career is done in the NFL. Like I liked what I saw this year out of him. Jeff, is there anybody for you?
I know he's starting to get a little bit older now. Jameis Winston is a guy that I just can't quit. But you run into these guys like Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, where I think it's interesting what has happened with Dynasty Superflex, where it used to be like very few backup quarterbacks would be rostered in Dynasty Superflex. Now you get a lot of guys. Now you see like a guy like Jacoby Brissett come in and play really, really well for extended period of time, and somebody like that. And then I think Davis Mills looked pretty solid when he was given an opportunity for Houston earlier this season. So he's still kind of on the upswing potentially of his career. He had a pretty solid early start to his career, and then they brought in CJ Stroud. Things fell apart a little bit there, changed the coaching staff, brought in CJ Stroud, and obviously shifted in the backup. But that's kind of the age profile where you're looking at a guy that has had that starting experience already. And like, as we're seeing Sam Darnold here tonight, or as we've seen some of these other guys that have had some success in the league or have some high pedigree in the league, but then get into learn and kind of sit aside for a minute and then get into a better situation. So that's one that comes to my mind. I think I just do want to say, I think it's so interesting, the dynamics between starting quarterback and backup quarterback, because you get a guy like Phillip Rivers he's a coach. I mean, Phillip Rivers has been a coach over the last couple of years now in retirement, and he comes in there with Richardson and he brings that coach into the room. Whereas like with the Falcons, I don't know how much mentorship was really going on with Kirk Cousins, who can still probably considers himself to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, and he sees Penix there. And so you just run into these, I think these dynamics are so interesting with these starters and with these backup quarterbacks.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you mentioned the guys you did, because I have a dynasty league team that this is probably in the 30 plus years I've been playing fantasy football. It's easily the worst season I've had collectively with my teams. Didn't make a single playoff. And like top 5 picks with aging teams or vast injuries. Like I've had either an aging team or vast injuries, mostly both, But here's what I added in the Football Guys IDP Dynasty League that I had been a contender for many years, and this year it just didn't work out. And Mahomes got hurt and Penix got hurt. So those were my 2 starting quarterbacks. But I added this week some names you mentioned: Mac Jones, Davis Mills, Jameis Winston. I also added Tyson Bagent, who I think that teams have been giving calls to since year 1 when he took over for Justin Fields, and they've been inquiring about trading. And if he gets enough time behind the scenes in that Ben Johnson system, I think we'll start seeing him on cleanup duty within a year when the Bears really start winning big. And I think next year we're going to see some games where we may see that next step with Caleb, where they're up 20-0 and they go, let's just take Caleb out and give Bagent some cleanup reps, and teams like what they see. Another one who I'm not a believer, but I'm more than open to seeing if he proves me wrong, is Joe Milton with the Cowboys. I mean, he's one of those guys that has the biggest arm in the league, probably. I mean, I've never seen a guy throw a football that far, and I scouted Matt Stafford. Stafford probably would have given him a run for his money early in his career. But, to me, and, it just seemed like he was a guy that the Patriots did a great job of saying, yep, let's take a chance on him, see what we got. And if we can get him in some games and show off what he does, somebody's going to come knocking because they like that flashy toy, and we'll be able to trade him for a profit. And that's exactly what they did. But what if he does grow? That could be worthwhile. And even if he doesn't, but he grows enough that he gets some opportunities, and now everyone's buzzing about him for a few weeks, the same way people buzzed about Will Levis, early on in his career, or Marcus Mariota early on in his career. Why not? I'll add 2 more. Trey Lance. I still believe that Trey Lance.
I was gonna go there.
Yeah, yep. Still believe in him. And then I would add that Curtis Rourke, the Indiana rookie.
OU Bobcat.
Oh yeah, OU Bobcat, exactly. And I liked what I saw of him as a rookie. And when the Shanna clan basically says, we're going to redshirt that kid because we think we've got something there, and we're going to give him a year off to get healthy, and then we're happy with what we're seeing there. Well, I'll take a shot on that, just because injuries happen. I mean, I'm sure most people didn't think Mark Bulger was going to be anything behind Kurt Warner when they had him, and then Warner got hurt, and Bulger had a couple of good years. So I know it's way back when, but when you get a chance to draw from that to make a comparison, why not?
I think Malik Willis is an interesting one. We've seen him come in and plug in and play passable quarterback there, and he's gotten some experience now in kind of this Shanahan tree a little bit. So that opens some things up there. We're talking about fantasy football. I mean, obviously we know he can bring it with his legs. And so that I think is an interesting one. I do think that the league, it seems like, is at a place with quarterbacks where it just hasn't been for a while. I think the last, you look 2 years ago or so, you had guys like, Trevor Lawrence early in his career. Kyler Murray was still kind of at that point where we're still want to see what we got. Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones coming off a really strong year. I think 2 years ago or so, it felt like most everybody in the league either had their established franchise guy or they had their young guy that they really wanted to see what they had. And those guys kind of grew up a little bit now, and a lot of teams found out what they had and might not be happy with what they found out what they had. It feels like we are on kind of just like ready for a major shakeup across the league, where obviously we're seeing this week Tua Tagovailoa getting benched for Quinn Ewers, and Kyler Murray. I mean, whether or not he was injured enough to be on season-ending IR might be one question or not, or whether or not they just didn't want to have to answer the question about when he's going to play again is kind of where I land on that one. Yeah. But I think that we're going to see definitely some of these guys that are going to be flipping around the league and looking for new opportunities. And you've got a lot of teams that I think are the Raiders going to run it back with Geno Smith, or are they going to get really aggressive or look for something? We know Cleveland, are they going to go with Shedeur Sanders? Are they going to go out and get something? The Jets, I don't think they do not have their plan in the building. Yeah. So I think we're going to see a lot of shuffling around the league with some names that we know and landing in different situations.
I don't care how much they treat the Lake Erie water. They shouldn't drink it there.
Do you guys think that, we mentioned Mac Jones and Brissett? I think that's probably the two most impressive names we've seen this year in roles. Do you think either of those, I don't think that Jones would take over for Brock Purdy. I don't think there's a way that he wins that job out. I mean, it's possible, but do you think Brissett ends up with a starting job next year? I mean, what he's done this year has been pretty impressive. Mariota too.
I think it's possible with Brissett that they at least roll with him as the bridge for whatever draft pick they get. Because I haven't studied these quarterbacks yet. I usually wait till about January or February to study them nowadays. But from just various people, the opinions seem to vary, which is everyone's talking about a different one because there really isn't one. It's very up and down and changeable, and what people value isn't necessarily what is valuable with the position. So if it's like the 2022 class, Kenny Pickett at the top of the board, Malik Willis, guys like Desmond Ridder, if it's more closer to that than it is like last year's class or 2 years ago, then maybe, Brissett probably gets a chance to be in it for one more year. It would be wise of them to give him that chance and that continuity, because as we've seen, the thing that cracks me up and why Kyler Murray's on my no-fly list of like a guy that I probably pick on Kyler Murray than more than any player that we've had in the past 2 or 3 years. But it's just that Murray's such a talented individual, but he's not a team player. He's not a quarterback in the sense of a guy who distributes the ball well. And we've seen how the difference is with Jacoby in the lineup. And when you hear then, as a side note, about a month ago that Kyler Murray wanted input on personnel decisions and convinced the team to bring Marquise Brown in, and you look at the fact that the team basically has, Trey McBride, the number one tight end, and the guy in purgatory might have had the best month of all but maybe 5 receivers ever in Michael Wilson. And the backup, the career backup, got more out of him than Kyler Murray ever did. It's kind of a way of saying, like, sit down, Kyler. don't talk, like work on your game. And still, then you look back at the clause, the study clause, and the fact that they wanted to institute that in, the fact that somebody did an academic style paper on Call of Duty, and that whenever a Call of Duty update went out, that Kyler Murray's production dipped, and that, like, it may not be true, but the data, the way it correlates, was actually statistically relevant, is hilarious. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you've got a team that it would be wiser for you to have stability at quarterback and continue to build on the strength of what you have so that you can plug other holes. And so I think it's the smart thing to do. But then again, there are teams, like I said, that they drink the polluted, the owners drink the polluted water, and there's a lot of backdooring and politicizing with GMs and coaches, and arguments, and people going, I'm going to draft this guy to prove you wrong about the arguments that we have. And so we don't know what goes on behind that building.
We do it could end up in a pretty interesting spot if either the Giants or the Titans end up with the number 1 pick, because I would be surprised. They're not going to move off Jackson Dart regardless of who's in the draft here, and I would be surprised too if Cam Ward is not going to be the quarterback next year. So that pick would be open for shop, and so who would go get it would be interesting to see if they decide that a quarterback is worthwhile going up and getting. And I think right now, in my mind, I need to dig in deeper on it. I'm not there yet, but to me, Fernando Mendoza potentially seems like about the only guy maybe in this class that I don't know that I think Dante Moore is going to be in there, and I don't know that teams are going to go there for Dante Moore is kind of where my initial lie lands there. But I do see Mendoza in very much in a Brissett type of a mold, where if the Cardinals found themselves in the position that they could add him and have Brissett start the year and serve as the bridge there, there's some overlapping skill set, and both are bigger guys. Both are 6'5" type guys, and kind of a lot of overlapping skill set there. But I think it's interesting when you talk about Michael Wilson, how Michael Wilson said Jacoby Brissett pulled him aside and said, hey, you need to be here on this play, or you need to be, and Michael Wilson's like, nobody, like, he was kind of like, what was here before was not doing that. Like,
no.
Yeah. That was I mean, if guys are just running around and yeah, exactly. I don't know. I think it's, and then I know that fans were really on it, but like Murray just stopped pushing the ball downfield. And so I think that, like, for him, I know we talked about it in your roundtable this week, and I talked about him in the roundtable this week because you gave the opportunity there. And to me, despite the athletic traits or the gifts that Kyler Murray has, when he's not really extending plays in the same way that Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen are creating, using his athleticism to open up big plays downfield, it's really just more like, let's dump it to the tight end or just run for my life, because this doesn't seem like any development at all has occurred there. And it's one thing when you've got a guy that's 21 years old, number 1 pick in the draft, and you're like, well, this is what we're going to have to deal with right now. It's something else when you're giving that guy $50 million and he's approaching 30 and he's supposed to be your franchise quarterback.
Yeah. And the difference between those 3 guys is that Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes were always willing to climb a pocket, because when you can climb a pocket, you can actually extend the length of the actual play design, the original play design, because now you're allowing your receivers to continue on their breaks, and you might actually find them on a second or third window of their break before the route becomes, it doesn't really work anymore as a route. It expires basically, before they got to reroute. And also you don't take a side of the pocket where now you're opening up, you're basically nullifying your offensive lineman's blocks. When you climb, you actually extend the life of your pocket, and you extend the life of your receivers. When you go outside, you invite more pass rush, you force reroutes. Everyone's rerouting and tired if you do this too often, and you also miss easy opportunities that could have continued, where now you're hitting someone in stride after somebody after a defender basically got tired or tripped up or just sloughed off a little bit on coverage because they lost concentration, focus, because it's hard to cover those guys for that long. And so when you reroute, you're actually inviting the defenders to actually get a refreshed start on what they're doing. So if you're actually, sometimes it just benefits that way. So he's not finding the simple solutions. He just makes those highlight Sports Center plays that once every 3 games, it's like, wow, that's such an amazing thing that he did. And you're like, yeah. And they don't play 500 football with him. And that's a problem. So, I mean, he's a really talented quarterback. He's a really lacking field general, and you have to be both to thrive in the NFL.
And he's got such like a Napoleon thing going. He could be such a good general on the field, but terrible. Sorry. Just low hanging fruit.
I'm curious. While we're on quarterbacks, you talk about climbing the pocket. I think it's interesting. So we know how the algorithm works. We know what we usually see. Like I see a lot of fantasy football takes as opposed to like actual football takes. CJ Stroud is a guy that I see a lot of frustration that he's not running. With like it doesn't run because that gives fantasy points. So it's like frustrating of like not getting the fantasy points because he's an athletic guy that could. But I think that the things you talk about there and climbing a pocket and understanding how to play the quarterback position, I think CJ Stroud is very, very good at that. And so I'm curious if you are on the same page there of because he's a guy that strikes me as like to compare him like naturally with the Ohio State quarterbacks with Justin Fields, the Ryan Day quarterbacks, like Fields would not climb the pocket, but he would hold on to the ball and like it wasn't the same thing. Whereas like Stroud's like more natural in the pocket, knows how to move, and so the lack of running that we're not getting for fantasy football, it's because he's very good at moving and manipulating the defense and allowing his playmakers to create space and find the ball to them.
Yeah, I mean, if and when the Texans get an offensive line, we're going to see him really shine. And I think that that's the thing. He's got the receivers now. I fully believe that between Collins, Jaden Higgins, and Noel, they're more than fine. That's going to grow and that's going to gel into something very good. They just need the line so that they can make it all come into play. And if they do, I think Stroud will be back to being everybody's favorite like he was at the end of the first year. We'll see that kind of, that bump. So no, I'm with you all the way on that. And it's more important because I know fantasy points wise, it helps people, from a fantasy points perspective, we don't care whether these quarterbacks are good or bad. We just want them to have points. So, you could care less about Justin Fields, whether he's a good or bad quarterback. You just know he's going to possibly run a lot. So you're just like, fine by me. I remember Blake Bortles. He was like Captain Garbage Time because he could run and you knew that he was going to get a lot of points when they were down, but at the same time, when you play Dynasty, you want a good quarterback. You don't just want a guy who might give you one good year and then that he's going to get his behind benched, and that's kind of, I think we're played out with Justin Fields. I think we know who he is. So yes. CJ Stroud, I think you're right. He's a more long-term project.
Who are your other no-flies? I know you've got this list that you're ready to go there with your no-fly list. Who's on that?
I'm going to add one who scored a touchdown in this game is Terrence Ferguson. I'm just not a fan. I think the guy is very limited as a tight end, and if he was as good as the others that are in this class, we wouldn't be hearing about Colby Parkinson as the head of this group. He's a clap attacker where it's like he drops passes. He's kind of he's athletic in the testing department, but he's not a very athletic mover. He's kind of an awkward mover. He's like that. I think of him as like some big scary statue on casters that you roll at somebody. And, if you got the right lighting and you got the good Hollywood effects, he might look like some monster who's moving at you. But if you saw what was going on in the studio, you'd go, oh, really? That's what tricked me? Okay. So, but I think that he has to be schemed pretty heavily. And when you even the example of his touchdown, it's one of those Tucker Kraft, Tyler Warren type of scores, but those guys can do more than what I think Ferguson can. Maybe Ferguson can get there like those two, but you got to scheme them more. So it's like, as long as he's a decent part of his scheme, I like that, but not really there. I'm gonna say Tet McMillan.
Ooh.
And I'm going there as if you can value him as a wide receiver too. Like if he were only to be valued as a wide receiver 2 in ADP, I'm all over that. But the fact that everyone's like he's the leading rookie receiver, looking at his stats, that just tells you he's going to be a wide receiver 1. And I have not seen him defeat tight press coverage yet in the league. He hasn't had many chances, but the chances he's had, the footwork's bad. He doesn't understand how to really do that yet. He gets schemed open a lot. He's the one-on-ones he does get are against linebackers and safeties. They're playing off coverage a lot, or he's playing zone, and he's very good in zone. He's a good contested catch player. He's a very good receiver, but he's not. But I think people are thinking he's going to take that next step. And I'm looking at Jalen Coker over here, who's like winning against man coverage, and he's the only receiver who's doing that. And unless he's the next coming of another old guy, Rod Smith, who was slow, but like could really still get it done, and I don't think he is. They're going to have to find another top wide receiver. And I mean, I think of Steve Smith, love him or hate him as a personality. I love him. But like, I remember in the draft, he was like, they drafted just another one of the same type of guys they've had, just a better version, And I think that from what I've seen, I agree with him. So if I had him, say I inherited a dynasty team, I'd be trading for him to see if I can get wide receiver 1 value and take the chance so that I can start over with something else. And if he's valued as a wide receiver 2, like more like a mid to low end wide receiver 2, I'll take that. I'll take him at that value, but I just don't. Yeah. No one's going to be valuing him like that, and I think they're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely trending to where his season-long finish for a rookie is definitely going to put him in for dynasty in the conversation of, and that's where you can potentially add some things on top and go get maybe a Malik Neighbors, or if somebody is in full-blown panic mode with Justin Jefferson or something like that. I mean, things like that you can.
I'll take Carnell Tate right now. Like, I'll give me Carnell Tate. If I could trade him for the rights to Carnell Tate and maybe get another pick, I'm there all day long, So.
Your Ferguson call out, I think, is interesting because I'm seeing it also now with Zachariah Branch from Georgia, and it's like similar where everybody's talking about the yak. And then everybody was talking about the yak last year with Terrence Ferguson. And then I would watch him, and it was like all these talented Oregon receivers running everything off. And then it would be a dump down to Ferguson where he would run it for 8 yards underneath the defense. And it's like, that's not yak. That's not like Tucker Kraft beasting a guy off of him and then getting downfield 15 yards downfield and then running for another 25. Like that's just cheap stuff. And I think
it's like a good producer like Joey setting up a mid-range talent like me to to rumble down the field. I mean, that's basically what's going on.
Well, like Zachariah Branch, I'm seeing people talk about his yak, and it's all just bubble screens is like his entire route tree. And it's like, how is this? Like, didn't we do this? It's one of those things we talked about last week of like the kind of look at the stats on things and understand the context of where these stats are coming from. But it's like, didn't we just do the Malachi Corley thing 2 years ago? And we're going to do it again with Zachariah Branch, a guy that don't know that he can run an actual route. But I think it's really interesting because that was all the conversation was Ferguson, but you turn the tape on and it's like, well, he's definitely not more athletic than Tyler Warren and these other guys, and so he's got great yak, but it's all just nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's players like, I think Brashard Smith is another one unless we see something different, and I loved Brashard Smith coming out, but the thing that got me panicked, and I don't normally tune into like broadcast, like what the broadcasts are saying, but I overheard Chris Collinsworth saying, "Yeah, I talked to Andy Reid," and I said, "What about this kid Smith?" And Andy's like, "Yeah, he's too small." And the fact that Andy Reid literally said he's too small and he's getting satellite time, I'm like, well, I'll hold on to him right now. But I'm waiting to hear about the 10 pounds of muscle, the 15 pounds of muscle, and whether that generates any kind of drum beats and momentum. And if it does, fine. But if it doesn't, then it's like, yeah, it's over, at least in Kansas City, for that guy. Yeah, go ahead.
When he had the opportunity this year, I was just like so excited. I'm like, all right, here we go. It's the next thing. And it just never came together. It's like, hey, where's Kareem Hunt? Let's go get him back. It's like, all right, here we go again. And it keeps working for him, I guess. But
when Pacheco went down, it was set up for Smith to 100%. Have a major role, and they just made Kareem Hunt the bell cow back. And I do think that that's another thing that we saw those stories about him running with the wide receivers and all that. And I feel like we view these guys and we build them up in dynasty, and we get excited about them because we all get rookie fever and we want to see how they work. And like our first initial, or like the instinct is, we're seeing Brashad Smith run with the receivers. Oh man, he's running back and a receiver. He can do all these things. And the reality of it is he's not anything. They don't know what to do with him. And so that's why he's running with the wide receivers, because they don't know what to do with him. And so it's one of those things that I feel like it's a false flag of, like, if I see a guy that gets drafted to do something and he's immediately doing something else, that's not saying, oh my God, look at this amazing diverse skill set that we got in the 7th round. That's saying this guy can't do the first job that we got him for. Now he's already to the second job to see if there's something here.
Do you think that the Chiefs use the next 3 weeks to kind of see what they have there? Because they're out of the playoffs.
I would.
Mahomes is gone.
They should. I mean, you would think.
I'm hoping that's exactly the case, and I'm hoping that he convinces Andy Reid. That Andy Reid looks at it and goes, "Man, you're small, but like, can you add weight? Like, if you add weight, I'll give you a shot." Like, I could see that meeting where he says that type of thing. The guy that also who's firmly on my no-fly list, and this is another big name from this year that people were hoping for, is RJ Harvey. They were missing left guard Ben Powers since week 5, but the rest of that offensive line has been intact, and J.K. Dobbins played well. And Harvey has benefited from volume, but he really hasn't been all that efficient. He hasn't really stood out. And Sean Payton's pretty quick to pull the plug on running backs, and he goes with committees anyhow. And I could just see them going with another back and just being like, Harvey's our change of pace guy that we use 2 to 3 times a game, and maybe we can get him to be a return specialist and go from there. But I'm kind of out on him. I'm out on every Broncos running back's name isn't Dobbins, and Dobbins probably ain't coming back either.
So this, I love that you go here, because this is something I haven't talked to you about. This I talked about it with Dave, but one of the things that I think is really interesting is we've seen Troy Franklin fall out of the office and the offense. And when did that happen? That happened basically in the fallout after J.K. Dobbins went down. And Troy Franklin is a horrible run blocker. He can't run block. And so my entire thesis is basically because RJ Harvey is not able to erase things in the way that J.K. Dobbins is able to erase things, they basically had to pull Troy Franklin and say, we can't use you because we need the blocking out here with RJ Harvey. We don't have the back that can erase things that allows us to get away with utilizing you. So we need to have Lil Jordan Humphrey out here instead, because we need more blocking out here, because RJ Harvey doesn't have any vision at all, whereas J.K. Dobbins is a very, very natural running back, and especially when it comes to vision.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I mean, it's a great point, and that's why it's funny about when we talk about compensation factors, whether it's within a player's game, whether, Steve Smith was short, he's short and light, but the way he plays, like, he might as well have been 9'5" instead of 5'9", basically because of his leaping ability, because of his contact balance, and because of his route running. And when you can have things that make up for other shortcomings, that works out well. But same thing happens on a football field with teammates. It's like you guys talked about Cooper Kupp, and then how do you compensate to make Cooper Kupp something? And now you don't have Cup. Well, you don't need to compensate as much. Now you can have more well-rounded players around, and it's the same thing that you're seeing, with the Denver example. I'll add George Pickens to the list too, as strong of a name that is. It's not because of his game. I mean, a few weeks ago I wrote about how people might look at him and go, all he does is catches fades and slants, but then when you look at his route tree, it's actually pretty impressive. It's pretty good. It's just that the gravity of his game is on slants and fades. And it's not so much that it's not about his ability. I mean, we've seen him be with bad quarterback play in Pittsburgh and still be a fantasy relevant player. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers, no matter what you think of them in terms of talent right now, they are the most professional organization in the league. The Dallas Cowboys, no matter what you think of them in terms of talent, might be one of the biggest circuses in the background in the league. And when you hear about CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens being up all night in Vegas, and I think you mentioned, Jeff, the last time we were on, that Lamb is known as a really dedicated kind of citizen who's very mature. And the fact that these guys, kind of had an off moment. I think George Pickens has a lot more off moments than we may know or that we suspect. And I just think, for me, it's like people are going to go, oh, well, he's only going to build on this. Look what he did in year one. Watch what he's going to do in year two. And it's kind of like Ted McMillan. I'd rather have George Pickens as my wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, much more like my 3 because of the maturity stuff I wonder about. But just in ability, I'd rather have him as a wide receiver 2. But I just don't. I look at that offense, I look at that organization, and I look at his history, and I feel like I'm just waiting for the teacher to leave the room, and I know that all mayhem is going to break loose. And that's a good point. Yeah, that's where I'm at with that. How about you, Joey? I mean, do you have anybody that you go, nope, even if it's a bigger name or even someone that just hasn't proven what they need to prove?
Well, I want to go back to RJ Harvey because you guys, as a native of Orlando, I am not allowed to say legally anything bad about RJ Harvey. But when he came into Denver, I was just hoping best case scenario for him because I got to see him play twice live at UCF and he was, holy cow, the kid was explosive.
Sure.
But I was like, and it's not going to work. He's got to be a change of pace back. And if he's not succeeding with that, I kind of agree with you. Like, it's no fly for me. I'm trying to think who I just like am completely out on. I think from a fantasy perspective, like,
it's hard because you want to stay open
tough
to as many situations as you can. And that's what I kind of led off with this article is I very rarely do no fly lists because it's like you've got to be open to that possibility. But there's guys that you see certain things with and you go, okay, no, I'm relative to value. I'm not there. It's not like I'm not going, he's never going to be good. It's more like until I see these things change, I'm not going there with him.
Well, I'm not going to say Brock Bowers because I'm not going to go down that lane. But until they get someone that can get him in the ball in his hands the way he needs to be, I don't know if he should be taken as a top 5 tight end. Like that's he has the talent to be that. But I mean, I think Geno's a somewhat competent quarterback. At least I thought he was. He hasn't looked like it at all this year.
It's hard when your offensive line's been as bad as they've 100%. Been.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you could say that for Ashton Jeanty but I think that's the thing. It's hard for me to believe Pete Carroll, all those years in Seattle where they weren't taking good offensive linemen. And then finally, John Schneider is like, relented on his, I can't get them at Big Lots like I thought I could. Maybe take some guys early and you see how they've played for most of the year as a result of updating their line. I'm hoping that Pete was in those rooms with John Schneider going, please get me an early round offensive lineman. What are you doing? I want to run the ball, and I think we're going to see that with him. But I could see how if after draft day, that line looks for pretty much the same as it did this year, I'm probably going to be off Ashton Jeanty as much as I like him.
Well, we were talking about, teams that, okay, who would be in the market for a quarterback? And I don't think the Raiders need to be. I think they need to focus on that line, like you said.
Yeah. How about you, Jeff? Do you have anybody that's on a no-fly list for you?
Well, on that Pickens point, real quick, when that story broke, when that came out, because that was an Island primetime game that he has that great game against the Raiders, and all the reaction was how stupid are the Steelers of letting him go, and I wrote about, so I write, it's called the Target Report, but I write about every single, basically more or less every target group. I'll group the top 3 options for that week and kind of break down how those played out. And my intro after that was basically, you have the Steelers, who are the most buttoned up professional organization, and they looked at it and said, we're gonna have to give this guy a lot of money. We don't want to give this guy a lot of money. They went out and got a guy that they felt a lot more comfortable with, and then they shipped him out to Dallas, and we're seeing this, and it was just so much irony of calling the Steelers idiots because George Pickens has this big game against the Raiders on primetime. Meanwhile, he was out until 1 a.m. Well, way past 1 a.m. But I mean, out all night long. And he's got your star receiver. He drug your star receiver out all night long too, potentially. The guy that, if he had DK Metcalf there, would CeeDee Lamb be out all night long? Probably not. No, DK Metcalf would probably be like, we're not doing this. So yeah. I think that's just an interesting, it was just very interesting.
So this is going to be a dumb question, but you got to understand, I work with Bob Harris every Monday, who has never seen this show, which is The Office. Okay. So could we compare George Pickens to Ryan? Could George Pickens be like Ryan in The Office, in the sense that there's some talent, there's some real talent there, and but there's enough issues going on that you just don't know if you're about to get conned. You know,
that's very fair. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I do.
Go ahead.
I do want to be careful about the passing judgment of people going out and staying up late in Vegas.
True.
I don't really want to talk about that too much because I'm going to be in that spot in about 2 weeks. But
hey, yeah, but that's a different story.
I'm just being funny.
Yeah. But
to me, we just saw today that the Jaguars gave Jacoby Myers a 3-year extension. They went out and they acquired Jacoby Myers. And to play off that a little bit, I don't think that they're very concerned about Travis Hunter. I think that they kind of started to see him blossom a little bit, and then obviously got hurt. Brian Thomas, I think, is one, and this is one that I got wrong. I think that where I had Brian Thomas in my dynasty ranks in the offseason, like the way that I viewed Brian Thomas now versus the way that I viewed him before is I think he is most comfortable being a number 2 receiver. And that's a tough pill to swallow for a player that I think he's talented enough. He's especially athletically, like physical gifts, all that. He's got all of that. And then I just think when it comes to, because there were a lot of talk, and I mean, take it for a massive grain of salt, because Brian Kelly is Brian Kelly, but there was a lot of talk around LSU about how just the maturity of Thomas down there in LSU, and just the frustration that the coaching staff had with Thomas, and would he put it all together or not? And what he was able to do at LSU, obviously he had Jaden Daniels at quarterback. He had Malik Neighbors as the number 1 receiver with him in lockstep. And Malik Neighbors I feel like he is born alpha receiver. He's ready to be the number 1 guy. And so Brian Thomas against college defensive backs was able to be the number 2 guy. And so I think that it's a really tough pill to swallow there so they go out and they get Jacoby Myers, and Jacoby Myers really steps in and says, I'm the vet. I can be the top guy. I'm going to lock down the slot here. I'll be your primary option. And it's allowed Thomas to perform better, without the pressure on him, I think, with having Myers there. And I think long-term, you look at Hunter as potentially being that guy. I'm really curious what happens with Thomas, because the contract and the talent is so much that I would be shocked, I think, maybe to see the Jaguars move off him at this point. He's locked up through the next 3 years. But at the same time, giving Jacoby Myers that extension, knowing that you've got Travis Hunter there, maybe that is them saying, we've seen enough here. We're going to capitalize on the market while we can and flip this guy, because it's that catch-22 of we can keep him for 3 years, but actually, if we're selling him with 3 cheap years attached to him, how much more valuable is that on the market? And we can just kind of cut our losses, move aside, have Jacoby Myers be our our slot guy here, have Travis Hunter develop into that number one receiver. And that's a far cry from where I thought Brian Thomas was last summer.
True. I mean, I'd love to hear what Joey thinks of that, even though I would bet that if you're in South Florida, I'm probably closer to the North Florida part than you are.
I'm like an hour and 15 minutes south of Jacksonville.
Oh, so you're closer. Oh, yeah. So
yeah. Where are you at?
I'm in Atlanta. I'm north of Atlanta.
Okay.
So
it's like 6 hours away from me. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think one of the things when Liam Cohen went to Jacksonville, I was most excited because Trevor Lawrence was like my flag plant this year. He was the guy that I thought was going to step up and do great. And then since week 5, yeah, of course he has. But I thought Travis Hunter was going to step in, be that wide receiver 1. And like Jeff said, allow Brian Thomas Jr. to be the wide receiver 2. I think it's something we actually did talk about. When Travis Hunter went down, I kind of forced his hand out of it. So I don't think we've actually got to see him as that. I think it could still happen there in Jacksonville. I don't think it's written. But like Jeff said, it could capitalize on the market and send him out. I can't see Jacksonville doing that, to be honest, though. I know what they gave Jacoby Myers and what we saw what Liam Cohen did down in Tampa over. I shouldn't say down. It is down, actually. It's down and to the right a little bit in Tampa Bay when he had great wide receivers there and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Jalen McMillan was coming on last year. He could easily have that in Jacksonville. That offense looks so similar to it, if you ask me, and it's his offense. So yeah, of course.
No, I mean it's interesting because maybe the reason that I'll think of exploring a way of maybe why they would trade Brian Thomas, and it would be my podcast partner Brandon Angelo's thoughts on this midseason, which was when you look at where Thomas was really productive in the passing game last year as a vertical option, it was with Mac Jones. It was not with Trevor. And so his theory is, and I think it's a compelling theory to discuss, which is his theory is that maybe Liam Cohen came into this offense thinking, I've got Trevor Lawrence. He's going to be able to air it out like Baker. We're just going to get the right scheme and fit. We've got all the components here. We're going to run this offense through Brian Thomas. He's going to be, my Mike Evans. He's going to be that kind of player. And then he got into town and the lights came on and they couldn't connect on those deep routes. It was like Thomas was breaking it on a back shoulder and Lawrence was throwing it deeper, or Lawrence threw it back shoulder and Thomas was going to a traditional fade. There were a lot of different miscues and miscommunications. And then on top of it, there were just missed passes from Lawrence deep. And so his theory is maybe with Lawrence, he just doesn't have good rapport with Thomas, and Thomas doesn't fit what Lawrence does very well at this stage of the game. So maybe I need to, because, he brought in Diami Brown, who's a speedster, and he was talking up Diami Brown all spring. And this Parker Washington kid is like, yeah, I mean, he's a nice special teams guy, just kind of, but he keeps impressing me, which is more of code for like, I don't want him in my lineup. We're not starting Parker Washington. By week 5, where we are, we got the mutter in Parker Washington. Then they acquired another mutter in Jacoby Myers, and so it's kind of one of those things where I think they just, maybe the theory that Brandon has is, I realize that I'm not going to win like the Tampa way. I've got to change up what I'm doing because I'm not going to tell the team we got to get rid of Trevor. I've got to win with Trevor. That's what I signed up for here. But I can get rid of Brian Thomas and probably get a lot of resources in exchange for that might help our team even more. And we just have to roll with a different identity. I'm more with you guys. It probably doesn't happen, but if it does, that might be the reason why, is that he finally realizes. I thought I don't know what the Bible verse is, but it's like some sort of Bible verse that talks about, the woman that you fall in love with and the woman that you marry are two different people. And it probably goes for any spouse of any gender. We don't have to make it specific about women. Yeah. See, but yeah, I don't know. But it's probably the same thing with quarterbacks, is that, he probably eyed the quarterback in a certain way and thought, this is what I'm going to get. And now he's getting a chance to work with him and going, now I've got to work with what I have. And make this partnership work well.
I don't want to take us off the rails, but that's what I do best. But Jacksonville's about to be doing something that's almost unprecedented. I mean, other teams have done it, but they're about to move to Orlando for a season. What do you think that affects a team when a thing like that happens? At a time they can just kind of, hey, let's work on some stuff that we wouldn't normally work on, or do they just play it as normal? It's such a thing I'm wondering about with what's going to happen when they're in Orlando.
I mean, all their infrastructure's got to change on some level, and if the facility management and the day-to-day operations management of the team isn't very good, I don't know if they're good or not, but if they're not great, that's a challenge even for a great facilities management and infrastructure and logistics and all those things in itself. And they're probably fine, but what about coaches? What about players? You know, don't they have routines and people that they work with and kind of get in the flow of things? Now they got to get used to all that. I mean, we've seen the Netflix NFL specials with some of these guys who change teams and all the things that they have to do in the background, and how that probably makes things a little unsettling, you know, and maybe that's I would imagine all the different things that Kirk Cousins probably and his family had to do. And then he's like, maybe that adds a little extra where I'm going, all these motions that I got to deal with. I can't remember all these motions. And I'm joking when I say it, but I mean, maybe there's something to it. I'm saying if you didn't have to drive on I-285 or I-85 on a regular basis in Atlanta, maybe he'd be able to concentrate on these motions a little bit more than all the motions of the traffic that he's dealing with compared to Minneapolis. You know,
traffic is pretty terrible in Atlanta.
It is.
Well, and
Trevor Lawrence got to deal with I-4 soon. That's bad.
Yeah, you're gonna live at home. You got a new home. Trevor Lawrence has got a home. He's got, and you're living somewhere else. You're living in Orlando. You're not living in Jacksonville. Are you going to commute? I mean, just human element of it. And I think that is one thing that we probably, as we're fans, as we're watching the game and we're following the game, what we really forget about the human element of what these guys are actually going through in their lives, of what's going on there. And I mean, we know it. If I were to take a job in Cincinnati, do I move down to Cincinnati? Do I commute because my family is very grounded here in Columbus? It's one of those things of it would just be a lot of just
the Sandusky Bengals. Yeah. No, that's crazy. It also kind of says, I mean, maybe I'm making too big of a leap, Joey and Jeff, but it also kind of screams to me, we don't really care about the players. We just care about the money, because here we are. Let's make this a big thing. Let's go ahead and do this kind of show. But if it's going to disrupt everybody in what they're doing, that's kind of, I mean, it's one thing to go play in Europe for a week.
Yeah.
That's the challenge enough. You're going to go to the next town. And what does that say to the city of Jacksonville? How does the city of Jacksonville feel about that?
I will say, I feel like Jacksonville, for the longest time, they thought that stadium was for one football game a year, and that was Florida, Georgia. And the Jaguars just play there on Sundays.
True.
And that's how it was viewed. So I will say, especially with Jaguars fans and with the team, I do think there's a higher rapport that they're actually wanting to put stuff into that stadium for them. It's just when I found out, they're not staying in Jacksonville, they're coming to Orlando, I got excited at first because it's oh man, I'm having an NFL team in town. I've never lived in a town with an NFL team before. But then I started thinking, I'm everything's going to change for them. I don't know. It was strange.
If you guys like architecture, building shows at all, it's on Disney Plus. It talks about Real Madrid Stadium when they overhauled that, and it's fascinating because they basically, as part of the overhaul, they had to play every game. They had to keep playing in the stadium as they're building the state-of-the-art stadium. And so it's almost the exact opposite of what we're talking about here of we're not going to disrupt the players' lives, but we're going to build the state-of-the-art facility while their lives are just continuing like they normally would. It's just a completely different philosophy.
I just think about this. Go ahead. Could you imagine the Pittsburgh Steelers playing
Erie,
Scranton? Yeah, in Scranton or Erie.
Steelers. I mean, if that's kind of roll,
come play in Columbus for a year so that you can play in Ohio Stadium.
I'm just wondering. I'm wondering how many residents of Pittsburgh wouldn't be visiting the Steelers front office upon hearing that news. I mean, they protested when the Browns moved to. They were protesting for the Browns. You know, when the Browns moved from Cleveland. You know, do you think they're going to be like, oh hell no, sorry Joe, but like that's, you know, that would be. I would love to see. I would love to see the Pittsburgh Steelers do that, and hate to see it at the same time, because I'd love to see it happen because the Steelers fans wouldn't let it happen, and we'd have our first bit of fan violence probably in the NFL that was directed towards an organization. And then I'd be sad to see it because we don't want that to happen, and it would be a sorry state for the league.
The Rams are a very, very good football team. Like that, they're a very good football team. It's rather impressive.
I was walking my daughters out to the car, and one of the dads, whenever he sees me, he's always excited because he's talking about football. He's like, "So Joey, who's the best team in the league right now?" And every time I see him, I'm like, for the last month, I'm like, "Man, the Rams, I think, are the best team." And then with Adams being out, he's like, "Oh, the Rams still," and I'm like, "I think they still are the best team, like all around."
Yeah.
The team building is just fascinating. How they basically had to learn to overhaul their scouting process because they didn't have any early picks, and so they had to learn to overhaul their scouting process. And as part of that, they just got super confident on their ability to find deep players and develop deep players. And now all of you got this team that, like, it's one that I don't know if the average fan realizes quite how good they are, because it's not a lot of guys of names that you know, but they're just very good football players. And so it's the way that they've been able to build that's fascinating.
I bet Les Snead has learned a ton since the days that he was an Atlanta Falcons head of personnel back in the day when the Falcons were back in like 2005, 2006 when he was with them. So what's going on now? I bet he is light years ahead of where he was back then.
Yeah. On that note, do we want to allow people to watch the end of this game here? We just got a Rashid Shaheed touchdown, and so the Rams were up by 16. We got a Rashid Shaheed punt return touchdown. Sam Darnold had done a drive down to the red zone, threw his second interception of the game deep in the red zone there. Then they stopped the Rams, came back. Rashid Shaheed took a punt back, and they got to 2-point conversion. So they did push it back to being a 1-score game here. But you guys have anything else you want to give the people for this evening?
That's my phrase. Give the people. I love it, Jeff. Just borrowing a little from me. Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah.
Enjoy your families. Thanks for having me on tonight, guys. Sometimes I just like to sit here and listen to you guys. Just absorb it. There's a stand-up comedian that was doing a set recently, and he's like, at a moment I decided this is going to be a listening portion of my evening. And that's sometimes when I come on the show, I'm okay with that. I like to talk, but sometimes it needs to be a listening portion, Joey. You sit back and absorb as much as I can. So thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us, Joey.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for this year. It really means a lot, and we really appreciate it.